Thank you, guys. Yes, and as you can see, Sonoma is already lit up with cars because Group 3 has already got underway. I'm delighted to be joined by a name I've heard many a time on a timing sheet at an historic event. His name, Thor Johnson. Thor, thank you for coming first and foremost. We're straight into it. Group 3 is up and away, and it looks like Cameron Healey in his Cooper, Porsche Pooper, which is a great one to start talking about, is leading the way. But welcome. What a great event. And let's start talking about Group 3. What do you know about this group?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that for the period that we're talking about and the type of cars, sports racers, the group that's here representing that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we've got pretty much one of everything. I mean, they go from things we have to understand is there's small, light, small power to large, heavy, big power. And it makes for a great race because the small light cars are real agile through the corners, but the heavier cars are a whole lot faster in a straight line. So it's a challenge and it's a lot of fun.
Where does Pooper come into all of this?
Well, I don't know why they did the nickname for it, but they made a couple of them, and Cameron's got one, and Denny Akers.
I guess it's a combination of Cooper and Porsche.
Yep.
Pooper.
And another thing that maybe the people watching this don't know is that we're required to run on what's called a 204L section Dunlop tires.
Right.
And the reason why they're actually from the formulation in the period, they're made currently, but they're actually from old formulation. So they're very hard, which means the cars slide around a lot. A lot of the cars you're going to see the rest of the day today will have our compound tires, and they have a whole lot better adhesion. So these guys are having to go fast, but keep control of the car because they slide around quite a bit. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, no question. Well, the man leading at the moment is that 1953 Cooper Pooper, or Porsche Pooper, and it was raced mainly on the East Coast at Lime Rock, Watkins Glen, Elkhart Lake, of course, back in 1954. It's a 53, and it raced from 1954 until 1969. And as you can see, it's a glorious piece of kit. That was Gregory Campbell we got a quick shot of in the 55 Porsche Devin Speedster. So we've got a combination of different cars from this era, and an important era because, as I said at the top, the Group 3s were effectively European cars coming over to take on the might of America, which already was establishing both circuits like Laguna Seca and some of the circuits I just mentioned on the East Coast. Sears Point, we're here at Sonoma, as it was then, wasn't built until a little bit later. But these cars were very relevant coming over from Great Britain literally after the war, especially some of the servicemen bringing them back. These small displacement cars. And really giving the Americans a run for their money, which was a surprise at first.
There was a whole pile of Coventry Climax motors that had been used for pumps, water pumps for fire control and stuff during World War II that were left over after the war. And young guys, and particularly in the UK, saw all of these motors, and they're worth nothing practically, and they started using them to race with, and it enabled people on a fairly tight budget to have a pretty successful race car.
Is there any particular car looking at this group, and like you say, it's got a bit of everything, that you want to point our audience to?
Well, I should tell you a story about, there's two different cars here, a Lola Mark I, there's several of them, and there's a Lotus 17, there's only one, unfortunately, today, which I would normally be driving. But
what happened?
Well, this is the end of the season for us, and my guys who take care of me and make sure I don't die every year. I give them a chance to go out there and race. Both of them are in my car in this group and my car in the Group 6. The guys, get a chance to go out and have fun. Frankly, they're better drivers than I am, so it'll be a good time for them. And anyway, to get back to the difference of the Lola, where the Lola came from, we also have some Lotus 11s here, and the Lotus 11s were dominant in under 2-liter sports racer, 55, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Mm-hmm.
and a guy named Eric Broadley who worked for
Eric.
Yeah, for Chapman, decided to leave and start building the Lola 1 to compete against the 11, because at that time Chapman was doing the 15 because he was going to try and dominate an over 2-liter. Oh, well, that's not good. into the wall here on the front straight.
Oh, that's not fun.
Right there.
Oh, sadly, the 57 gets turned around right in front of us. Sadly, William Taylor in that Monaco, that Cooper Monaco from 1962.
I think something broke. So anyway, to go on with the story, Broadley, when Chapman found out that Broadley was making the Lola to go against the 11, that angered him, so he decided to make the 17 to challenge the Lola. But at the same time, they were building the Lotus 18 with a rear-engine formula car, and it was very successful right out of the box. So they said, well, why don't we make a rear-engine sports racer? And so they made the 19, and that meant that the Lola and the 17 were basically one-year cars. They weren't competitive as soon as the rear-engine sports racers came out. That was pretty much the end of those two cars. Although, for those of us who own them now, they're a heck of a lot of fun.
Oh, no question. Absolutely. And I think that was the essence of the day, which was these small displacement cars, these low to the ground cars, were just great cornerers, lightweight. That's certainly how Lotus and Lola intended, getting the most out of small displacement, but being able to corner. And that was their advantage. And yes, we are under a caution or a yellow here in this first of our Group 3 races because we had a turn. It's just a local yellow on the main straight. It looks like the car is actually okay. It's going to take a hit. It's going to need to be taken away. But all due care is taken, as you can imagine, as we watch the Lola Mark 1 in all red. John Hill from Seattle at the wheel. And this is exactly what you're talking about.
Indeed. You know, I love the little sports racers, the lightweight sports racers, but then you see a couple of cars out there like the 56 300S Maserati. Oh my gosh, that's eye candy right there. And the Ferrari that's out there, and this car here,
Maserati.
Yeah, Maserati with David Swig in it. It's got he says, and I've been behind him occasionally. He says that he could probably turn as fast a lap time if he had 150 less horsepower because it would
too
be
much
easier to handle.
Because he's got a big bore engine in there.
Yeah, big V8. Yeah.
1957.
Yep.
And this is what I was talking about when we started, which was this was the Americans, if you like, sort of trying to reply to what the Brits were bringing over, and not just the Brits, the Italians and the French and so on. And it was more a case of sort of, well, what can we do? And obviously Americans still to this day love their horsepower. What do you get to the ground? And that's what it's all about. But that can be, there's a fine balance between raw power and nimbleness, isn't there?
There definitely is. Well, and that's what it makes this a decent race too, because if, for example, Cameron with the horsepower that he's got compared to the people that were running close to him and the big V8s and stuff, the only chance he's got is because he's nimble and light.
Yeah, in fact, that Chevy V8 in the Maserati was used at hill climbs in the SEA events as well as rallies in 1957 through the early 60s. And would, take on the likes of the D-Type Jaguars and the XKs. Even a Maserati 300 it would be up against. More powerful sometimes, but that was certainly a way of kind of trying to equal things out. Horsepower of 230 in that particular car that you're looking at right now.
That's a great car. We like to refer to all these that were basically one-ofs in the period. Junkyard dogs.
Yeah, hot rods.
They could bite you.
The original hot rods.
They could bite you.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet. Now, also, I want to sort of bring in something we talked about yesterday. When you see a Porsche Devin Speedster. Now, the word Devin comes from the development here in the States, isn't it? And it's just basically a name put on by the company that effectively modified those cars.
Yeah, you could buy, in fact, we have one, was in the grid, but unfortunately broke the rear end, an SS, a Devin SS, which was actually built, the whole car was built by Devin. Mm-hmm. That was their only real car they sold, a whole car. The rest of it was a chassis and a body, and you could do whatever you want with it. You could put whatever motor in there, and there's been all sorts of different motors put into those Devins. Like, for example, the SS is the V8 in the front. And on the case of the Porsches, there are Porsche motors in the back.
So, yeah, let me ask then, if you get what I would call a standard Porsche from Europe, what would Devin want to do straight off the bat with it? What would the customer want to have changed, if anything?
You mean as far as
make it to make it into their own or make it customized?
Well, basically, you know, they provided a shell, and you had to do the rest.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was heavy modification to make a front engine car into a rear engine car.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Cameron Healy leads the way from John Hill in that Lola Mark 1 that we saw, the number 11A. They're all behind the pace car while we extract, sadly, that number 57, which has just got turned around. That's a Cooper Monaco from 1962 in that beautiful bare aluminium. William Taylor was at the wheel at that, but they've just taken it away, so we should be racing very soon. We've still got a good 12 minutes left on this race. So we're talking to Thor Johnson, who should be out there right now in the 57 Cooper Monaco himself, but not to be.
Well, like I said, my guys keep me alive every year, and at the end, and they're both great drivers. And at the end of the year, I like to give them a little chance to get out there and have some fun. I ran on Wednesday, or on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, you know. So today they can go out and have at it.
Yeah, and I think people tuning in, especially people tuning in this early, will be fans of the racing. How many events do you do a year? Because I've only just begun to realize just how big the historic scene is, particularly here in the States.
Well, I'm actually in the decline, as I've gotten a little longer in the tooth. Typically in the past, we do a minimum of at least 12.
That's great.
And we do an East Coast swing from Mont Tremblant to Elkhart Lake and Watkins Glen. And then we come down to California from Washington to run events here and at Laguna. And then at home, we have 3 or 4 events at home as well. And at Portland, we also race at Portland. So, you know, now it's kind of dwindling a little bit. It's less about, it takes a lot of time. I mean, we have to fly in a day before, and then we're here and leave. So I'm getting homesick.
Don't blame you.
At the end of the season, it's time to go home and be with the wife and my pups. So.
I'll bet. Jeffrey O'Neill, Ryan Turry, the organizers of this event, never easy to come into a world that is not saturated, but is very established, let's face it. This is the 4th year, and they've taken a slightly different approach. And they've certainly taken an approach where there is no reproachment on what they've got. Some of the cars here are second to none. And so if you're going to do it right is the older adage. And I think there's a lot they've got here that is absolutely right.
I believe that I can say this, and I've got my own opinion, that this is already and will continue if he keeps going. I'm praying. The premier event on the West Coast, to be honest with you, because, like you've said, they made sure they kept the grids small enough, and the cars are real cars from the period, and they also, it's invitational. That means if you're have a little problem with not staying away from other people, you don't get invited. So, and that's a good thing, because some of these cars are, as you know, extremely valuable, and nobody wants to take out a car like that and have somebody run into them with something that, you know, it's a problem. And unfortunately, some of the other bigger events are starting to open a door for pretty much anybody that's got a paycheck, you know. So, and
I think that is important, that invitational tag to it, because, you know, that said, yesterday's racing was just that. We had Gunnar Jeanette going up against Horatio Fitzsimon in one particular race that I remember, a Ferrari against a Lotus. And, I mean, it was a photo finish. And, you know, but there was respect. They were sliding the cars, and they were, you know, multi-million-dollar cars. But these were the right guys to drive them. They know exactly, having known Gunnar for a long time, and of course he grew up with his dad restoring cars in Florida, so he knows what this is all about. He's a very good driver, as is the young Horatio, and you know, it was more than a spectacle. It was a genuine race, and I think that if you can get that balance right, is quite rightly as you say, it is invitational. If you start to mess about, hey, that's not what we're about here, and I think they've got that balance between both racing and putting on a show.
Yeah, I think we have to know that there are a few actual professional racers here.
Oh, yeah.
However, the vast majority of us are, in essence, are amateurs. And we can be wild amateurs, or we can be amateurs that are paying attention and not wanting to damage themselves or anybody else. And it doesn't mean we're not trying to be competitive. I mean, it's out there. The juice is out there, but we kind of try to keep control on that a little bit.
Yeah, and the small time I've been involved in historics, it has amazed me, as you say, quite rightly, most of the competitors are amateur or pro-amateur, entries. And that makes it sound like, well, they're not as good as the guys from the original day, or they're not but to be honest, it's the same car. So if you're wheeling it, you are able. And I think, given that we're talking cars of 50 plus years old, that we all drive cars today, but there's no ABS here. A lot of them have drum brakes. There's a lot of things that, just are taken as a given that you don't get to work with in terms of modern cars anyway. And so actually, I would say the dynamic, I don't know, Lando Norris is here, one of the top drivers in the world. I think he'd struggle if you threw him in your Lotus. He'd certainly have to think about it. Yeah, exactly. Pato O'Ward, who was at Velocity last year, I think took out one of the vintage historic Trans Ams, and he just wasn't, he didn't have his head around how he had to, what revs he needed to change up. And it was something, because he's got paddle shifts and all the rest of it. No problem, no fault of his. But that's a different generation, isn't it?
It is. And we used to have an award years ago that was when the age of the car and the age of the driver exceeded 100 years, they got an award. Well, they gave that up years ago because there isn't anybody out there that doesn't add up to over 100 years old now.
That's hilarious. Well, it's still Cameron Healey leading the way in that lovely car, like we said, mostly raced on the East Coast at some of those tracks you mentioned, like Elkhart Lake and Road America. And beautiful car.
Yes, it is. And he's a great driver. And John behind him is also a fine driver.
Yeah, that Lola Mark 1 is in second place, a 1960 version of that. John Hill at the wheel, as you mentioned. Gregory Cameron moving up to third place in that 356. Another 55 Porsche Devin Speedster. And then another Lola 1, Mark 1 from 1960. And Swig in that Maserati Special from 1957. Dropping just down. Oh, he's just dropped down to 6 places. Lion is now behind him, and we are now running out of time at the finish for this Group 3 feature race.